You may have seen some things about sitting is the new smoking, and you may have said that you're a chiropractor. Of course, sitting is important, posture is important. The world is looking at this more and more. And what one thing we're going to be talking about is communicating and understanding what is going on in the world with sitting and using that as a way to build a strategy to brand you as being the posture expert. Um, if you read Scientific American, last November there was a really nice article about killer chairs. Standing more, even at a desk job, could lower the risk for obesity, illness, and death. So the flip side of this was if you're sitting more, you're going to die sooner. And there was some cool studies that were supporting that Scientific American reference. Scientific American is not generally considered to be a National Enquirer kind of doom and gloom sensationalist magazine. They really stayed. For Scientific American to be talking about sitting as being a risk factor for health is a big thing. It's a data point in a direction of something that was less important and is going to become more important. And this is the seed of some of the opportunity for chiropractors that I've been talking about for well over 10 years at this point. That posture is relevant. And if you build it and communicate in a way that's unique, building a niche with that makes sense. Other data in the same direction. Last month, in January 2015, in the Annals of Internal Medicine, which is a level one, a tier one journal, a high quality journal. They did a meta study. They looked at 47 other studies, and they looked at the results and they correlated them 16 ways from Sunday, and they found that prolonged sitting affects mortality from all causes, even if you exercise. If you sit for 6 to 12 hours a day, there was a 91% increase in type 2 diabetes, almost a doubling of the risk for diabetes. The overall mortality went up by 24%. From heart disease, mortality went up 18%, from cancer, 17%. In fact, from the risk of developing cancer went up 17%. This is probably the best study done um, on the health effects of sitting in a somewhat controlled setting, and they looked at all the different studies that have been done to that time. And here's where it starts to get interesting. In the same issue, the article that we just talked about was the one on the left, sedentary time and its association with risk for disease and mortality and hospitalization. And in the same exact issue, they did an editorial. These are the people that publish the Annals of Internal Medicine, that choose which articles are going into the Annals of Internal Medicine, and they did an editorial talking about this article and the problem of too much sitting in chronic disease. What needs to happen to move the science forward? So, if you're a researcher and the editor of the journal is writing an editorial saying, we want to see more research on this, it's probably a pretty good bet that there's going to be more research on this. And when you look at their editorial, it's things that, as chiropractors, most of us are going to be agreeing with that. We live in a physically and socially engineered sitting centric society. Research findings don't allow a precise identification of the duration of sedentary behavior that creates the risk of chronic disease. And they made a proposal of three sitting research themes. There's some overlap between these themes, but the themes for, hey guys, you need to be doing more research, was isotemporal substitution models. We'll talk about that in a second. Objective activity monitoring, things like having people wearing a iPhone watch or a Fitbit or one of the other activity monitors that work with apps, and from there to the web, that are becoming more and more prevalent, as well as population demographic subgroupings. Does it make a difference if you're male or female, tall or short, heavy, or whatever the other subgrouping happens to be? And they the isotemporal substitution models is basically the biggest bubble that needs to be looked at, and they talked about that, and that what that means is, at the same time, if you're substituting one activity for sitting versus another activity for sitting, what makes the most difference? So if you're sitting versus standing, as opposed to sitting versus walking, as opposed to sitting versus whatever. Having whether it's sitting at a long stretch of time or breaking it up with exercise, and there's a lot of different things that have not been looked at. The science just isn't there yet. But looking at it, they found that there's a dramatic risk, as evidenced by that first article, and they go on to conclude that the potential for innovative approaches to reduce health risks of too much sitting, particularly for primary prevention, is considerable. There's a high leverage area to make a big public health improvement by affecting people's behavior. But the question is, what's best for people? What are the recommendations? What do they need to be? And the evidence for that isn't there. And here's the opportunity. We've been talking about these kinds of issues for years. One of the observations that I make about sitting is, with the sitting and the sitting and health meme concept set, is that there's two factors that are intertwining, that are creating vicious spirals, vicious cycles, or virtuous spirals, that become self-reinforcing to make something either worse or better. One factor is that people are, when they're sitting, they're inactive, and that sedentary behavior means they're not functioning as much. The other is a structural issue. The posture is folded, and the interaction between structure and function, activity and how the body physically is, are two independent factors. They're interrelated, but they're not the same. And as this gets teed out, as these factors become teased apart, my strong conviction is that structure will be seen as a larger and larger contributor to health, and you need to be active and take care of your structure as two interrelated but separate factors. Let's look briefly at activity versus inactivity. There was a really cool thing from about 10 years ago, talking about sedentary death syndrome, where the President's Council on Physical Fitness noticed that people that were less active, that were sitting more, were dying more quickly. This is kind of where this current situation began from. And if that was a disease by itself, it would be the third leading cause of death in the U.S. But the problem that they had with quantifying is that sedentary death syndrome is not one disease. It's a whole bunch of different ailments, ranging from diabetes, depression, respiratory problems, osteoporosis, sexual function, that happen when you spend more time sitting. The cost of the U.S. economy at the time was estimated to be 1.5 trillion. It's been way more than that. And there's been some research groups that have looked into the 2 million deaths that are attributed each year from this activity. And these numbers are probably low when you look at things today. So when we talk about sitting is the new smoking, we're talking very consciously that it's a composite meme. It's a composite idea set, the composite set of buzz. One is inactivity versus inactivity, and the second is the body structure. Whether is it flexed or is it vertically aligned? And that's where we begin the dialogue about posture and biomechanics. If you've been to any of our classes, if you've read Stand Tall, Live Longer, if you're a CPAP, and I know there are some CPAPs on this call, this is some of the new things that we'll be talking about for the May's Posture Month promotion, especially in social media. If you're not a CPAP, consider looking into what it takes to become a local posture specialist. In terms of using the five posture principles of motion, balance, coming to patterns. Your body moves in patterns of motion that follows the path of least resistance. Poor posture creates adaptive motion, and adaptive motion creates poor posture. That's the vicious spiral of posture degeneration. We strengthen that with strengthening posture to strengthen motion to create a virtuous spiral. The principle is the body moves in patterns of whole motion, which follow the path of least resistance. When structure is flexed, it affects how the whole body motion works. And this is a concept that's been taken up lately in the media as well. Wall Street Journal last June had an article talking about how bad sitting posture at work leads to bad standing posture all the time. So it's not just stand up and you'll be fine. It's that your body folds and changes over time. And they talked about what good posture means, which is aligning ears over shoulders, shoulders over hips, and hips over the ankles, which is kind of what everybody knows. But people don't know quite what to do because when they try to stand up straight, they think they are. And if you're taking posture pictures, you know that their perception is not accurate. Um, they went on to talk to some an orthopedic surgeon who said that posture is the 800-pound gorilla when it comes to health and wellness, and that the spine and overall skeletal structure is critical to a patient's functionality as well as their satisfaction with life and healthcare, especially as we get older. When you look at people's activity as they get older, the ones who keep on slumping more and more forward keep on sitting more and more because their body keeps on being folded. They're less active, other problems happen, and that's that vicious spiral. Keeping bodies vertical and active are two independent but co- but but coexisting and reinforcing trends. This is why smoking is sitting is the new smoking is a potentially really powerful meme talking about posture. So when we talk about posture, the idea that we're putting out there is posture is global. It's how straight you are. It's how you align your body, how you balance your whole body, and how you move your whole body. That it's a whole body thing. When you talk to people about this, everyone knows that there's an issue. Well, you know what? I'm going to show you a short clip right now of a TV interview that we did a few weeks ago, and look at the interviewer's posture when they're talking to me, and imagine talking to people in your neighborhood about posture and engaging them the way that I'm engaging these people about posture. Take a look. Thank you very much.
And we're both now very conscious of the way we're sitting.
I always sit like this. I always sit like this at all times.
I can tell.
Well, it's said that sitting is the new smoking. We keep hearing that. Is that? I thought it was just because we're sitting too much and we're not moving enough.
And that is very much part of it, because if you're not moving, you're not getting exercise, and exercise, your body's made to move. But because we spend so much time sitting, and not just sitting, but sitting with our arms rolled in on keyboards or our thumbs rolled in on texting, our body's literally folding, and your posture, your muscles get trained to be like that, like an old person.
So what's wrong with that? How does that harm our health?
That's the question you want to be answering. How folding posture affects your health, and beginning from a patient point of view, how it affects the problem that brought them in the door. Because people don't come to most doctors initially for wellness. They come to most doctors because they've got a problem. And especially if you're a chiropractor, if people coming to you that have back pain, neck pain, joint pain, there's almost always going to be a postural problem. This is why for chiropractors as well as other motion-based professionals, the opportunity here is positioning as a posture specialist, addressing people's desires to move pain-free, move well, and be well by building a practice correlating and connecting the idea that your posture is important. Take a picture, benchmark it, know what it looks like, and do things to strengthen it so that next year when you take a picture again, you're going in the right direction instead of in the wrong direction of a forward, slumped, old posture. And connecting that not just with that picture of what they're visually seeing, but how they're feeling, how they're kinesthetically aware of their bodies when they're doing exercises. And that's the idea of the strong posture exercises, strengthening people in ways to do motion that focuses on one link of the chain at a time, and then to strengthen that motion, systematically building a daily routine of functionally strengthening postural balance, postural alignment, and postural motion. And this is what we talk about with the posture practice model that CPAPs talk about, using a triangle of concepts, consciousness, and control of strong posture and motion, from the assessment when they walk in the door to treatment to education, using posture awareness with the picture and those exercises to interact with the concepts of biomechanics. Basically, your body has three elements of posture: balance, alignment, and motion, BAM as we call it. Four posture zones. You balance your head over your torso, over your pelvis, over where you're standing. And five posture principles. We talked about a few of those earlier. And integrating that with teaching them how to do something to affect their posture. Building a better awareness of how well they're moving, and giving them a framework for them to both move better and stand taller, hence the name of the book, Stand Taller, Live Longer. Those strong posture exercises are very much about control, conscious control, and focusing some of that motion on the motor control system that you know by some other names. That's the inner core muscles, the deep core. People talk about the core, and there's different layers of the core, but the innermost layer of the core is the transverse abdominis, the multifidus, and the pelvic floor and the diaphragm. There's another name for the core. It's the connection between the middle two posture zones, the torso pelvis, or posture zones 2 and 3. And that the innermost layer of that deep posture zone connection, the deep core connection, is what you use to stabilize everything that you're doing. That deep core is the connector between the top part of your body connecting it to the ground, and that's what you use to stabilize. And the coordination of those muscles is absolutely key and essential when you are doing anything where your body is vertical. So the torso pelvis connection is another name for the core. Let's take a closer look at that right now. Those innermost muscles, on the top is the diaphragm, and on the bottom is the pelvic floor. Pelvic floor is neglected. In fact, some people call the pelvic floor a second diaphragm. And when you look at it anatomically, it really is. There's a diaphragm of a tube of where the abdominal viscera is, where there's a bell on top and a bell on the bottom. And then there's muscles in front of the transverse abdominis is the deepest layer. The rectus abs, the six-pack muscles, those are further out. Those are important for function, but they're not the main stabilizers. And in the back, there's tiny muscles between each segment of the spine. The deepest layer of that is the multifidus, and those multifidi are these deep stabilizers that become part of that inner core, the connecting the torso and the pelvis. And what's really important is that when you're sitting, that inner core is being folded, and that folded core affects posture in a dramatic way. On a segmental basis, the spine, instead of being in a positive arch going forward, almost always will be rocking backwards, literally buckling, because the diaphragm on top and the pelvic floor on the bottom are getting pushed closer together. So the spine in the back end tends to buckle backwards, and in the front, instead of having a long open abdomen, because you're scrunching even more forward in front, the abdomen tends to push forward, and your body is literally scrunched forward where all the viscera, all the organs are being compressed as well. That compression affects things above the diaphragm as well as below the diaphragm. Above the diaphragm is the lungs. You can't breathe as deeply. Below the diaphragm, also things really important. Digestion, gastrointestinal, on a macro level, the intestines, but also on a more subtle level, things like the liver and pancreas are being compressed, and things they should be secreting may not be moving as well. And that could be one of the really big reasons why mechanically the flexion of the torso and the pelvis has been associated with things like diabetes. So the thesis is that a folding posture affects not just the biomechanic balance that affects pain, performance, and aging, and this is one of the things we've talked about strengthening in multiple classes. And again, if you haven't taken our online courses or the CPAP course, consider it. If you need CE in this world, posturepractice.com has got a lot of information on posture, but you can also take the online classes for CE, or go. If you like it a little bit, go for CPAP. If you know you like it, go for CPAP now, and you'll save a couple of bucks. But that also affects breathing, gastrointestinal. Cortisol levels are affected by sitting posture. So the adrenals are being compressed, as well as being literally a mind-body thing. A bunch of attitude and issues are correlated with people sitting more. And using the posture model that we talked about of head balances on torso and pelvis, and you're trying to align those masses to make them more aligned and more vertical and open chest. When a body is sitting, you'll notice those posture zones are deviating. Torso is deviating backwards, head's deviating forward as the body folds, making the whole system become less long, shorter. And that affects things like breathing, which goes along with other means in the world, which is learning how to breathe. Wall Street Journal, literally less than a month ago, had a big article about breathing better. Doctors try using the most basic medicine that you should be improving breathing. And this is things like the Wall Street Journal, Annals of Internal Medicine, Scientific American. These are as mainstream as you get to either the public, for the Wall Street Journal, or the professionals that we spoke about. And when the Wall Street Journal, talking to the public, talks about how controlling your breathing is an easy way to improve mental and physical health, and that breathing slowly stimulates the vagus nerve, which runs from the stem of the brain to the abdomen, and that the vagus nerve has signals release of transmitters that can be anti-inflammatory, and talking about sympathetic versus parasympathetic balance. This is a newspaper to the public, and when I read this is the kind of message that I've talked about for years about uh, creating wellness and helping people to work better by being aware of how the body moves and the nervous system in ways that are less known but important. When this is coming out in mainstream media, we should be talking about it. If you're a chiropractor, if you're concerned about health, you should be talking about it because it's really important. Breathing's important. One of the things that we do lectures on documentation a lot of times, and when I ask doctors what's important in patients, posture is always big there. When they say documentation important, yes. When I ask is breathing's important, everybody laughs. When I ask people if they document breathing, almost everybody looks at me with a deer in the headlight look. If you're not, you should be documenting how people are breathing, different ways of breathing. We can go into more detail, but uh, simply you can breathe through your chest, you can breathe through your diaphragm, or you can do a little bit of both. You breathe with your chest, diaphragm flattens. When you're breathing in, if you're breathing with your chest, the chest goes up. So chest breathing, chest goes up. Diaphragm breathing, diaphragm flattens, belly goes out. And you should be looking at this and seeing how people are breathing. Um, we're trying to create an awareness in people's part of the biomechanical difference of what happens when you're having um, a person sitting where the body is folded and you literally can't take as deep of a breath, and what happens from an activity point of view. So um, if you're in CPAP, you'll be getting some more information about some of the projects for Posture Month, especially the mainstream media stuff. We have some cool articles that we're hoping to get out there in the mainstream media. And people becoming aware of their breathing and taking a posture break is going to be working in that direction. I'm going to give you a brief demo of some of that right now. From where you're sitting right now, take a deep breath in and just kind of notice how much air you get as an awareness. If you're driving, don't do this now. But what I'd like you to do is stand up. And with standing up, try to find your best tall, strong posture. I'm standing up with my ball right now. Yes, I was sitting on my ball. Look straight ahead, level your head, make your head a bit tall. Try to get your head away from your feet, but keep it level. If you're not looking straight ahead, look straight ahead. That's the must part of leveling your head. Um, Open your chest up. In fact, move your shoulders up, move them back and back down. That'll move the scapula along the posterior side of the rib cage. And then take a deep belly breath in. And notice if there's a difference in how you're breathing. Incorporating strong posture breathing into a strong posture break is where we'll be going with this. And that's one of the things we'll be covering in the second part of this webinar, which is going to be, I believe, April 7th. If you're not registered, please register. We do have limited space for that. And once you've registered, tell folks, because if we end up getting really busy, I'd like to be able to reschedule it for a follow-up. And that has happened sometimes, as some of you know, when we do have these things that are popular, especially for May is Posture Month. And I especially, there's going to be more CPAPs on that one as well, because it's the annual time to really promote the idea of being a posture specialist. And the concepts that we'll be talking about is functionally strengthening the conscious control of posture with strong posture exercises, focusing on those 4 posture zones and making that be the target being best performance, as well as maximum making bodies work as best as possible. using the strong posture exercises. I'm going to be going on for about another 3 minutes. Then we're going to be taking some questions. I've got a couple of questions over here. But if you could write them down, we'll type them out, but I'm going to get to them in just a minute. The thing that all strong posture exercises have in common is that we use must versus try cueing. You must keep your head level. You want to try to move it back towards a perfect alignment over your torso. But the level is the imperative. And attentional focus on one link in the posture zone chain of head, torso, torso, pelvis, which is core, pelvis, lower extremity, hip complex is part of that. Focusing on one thing at a time, and then sequencing those patterns of posture zone coupled movement, both for the posture exercise itself, and then learning how to incorporate that motion into what you're doing in everything in life, into global motion or regional motion. When you're walking, running, incorporating strong posture into that, and doing this by building a daily routine of doing postural exercises. 3 times a day, doing a balance exercise. Twice a day, doing an alignment exercise. And once a day, doing a motion exercises, which is the idea behind Stand Taller, Live Longer. And it's very much made to be, again, building very intentionally a virtuous spiral where you're strengthening balance, and then by creating awareness on balance, and then looking at alignment and strengthening alignment, which in turn improves balance, which in turn improves alignment, and then pulling motion into it, using the ball as a way to focus attention in a controlled way on one link of the chain at a time, and then sequencing it with the progression of strong posture exercises. Okay, that's the main points that I wanted to go over today. I've got some other info as well. Some people ask me about CPAP, you don't have to come to a seminar to start doing CPAP. You can, and in fact, we highly recommend beginning doing CPAP online. Here's a slide about CPAP. Basically, CPAP is a certified posture exercise professional. If you're a CPAP, you want to put that logo on your website, on your business cards. And the practice model we talk about is integrating consciousness, concepts, and control to build the niche of being posture specialist. And this is good for talking to patients, talking to the public. Medical doctors, other physicians love this model because it makes sense to anyone's point of view. And we talk about combining the live seminars, which includes very much hands-on. You do it like this, so you feel it both on the personal level, and this is always entertaining because people think they're moving one way, and when someone else is working with them, they find the difference between how they're moving and how they're truly moving. And that's what we call a sensory motor error. We'll be talking about those more in the next webinar as well. It also includes the online webinars, which is 15 hours of CE for posture practice online. And you don't need to be in CPAP to do that, but it does make a bit more sense to do it all in one shot. Other resources that are CPAP only are the staff meeting training, as well as other webinars and resources, as well as other grids like the patient lectures, the grids, the patient handouts, forms, support, basically the tools to build a posture practice. And with this webinar with C1S, we're going to be having a special offer of a posture grid, which is a $249 value, as well as a tool set. C1S is a great place to get the tools that you want, from balls to bands. These are the things that we teach doctors how to use. Big fan of TheraBand with these things. And so C1S is going to be donating a set of tools for the people that are signing up here for CPAP through the end of this month. I'm going to be at NCLC in Washington later on in February, so it'll be between now and the end of February. If you're going to be at NCLC, please come to my class, but let me know ahead of time. I'd love to have your feedback and input on how it's going with your incorporating your posture practice. If you're a CPAP and you're going to be there, get with me. We'll be doing some meetings up there about some of the ideas about promoting things. Also, if you're going to be at the World Federation of Chiropractic in Athens, Greece in May, I was invited to speak there. Highly excited about that. So please connect with me with that as well. But If you want more information about CPAP, go to posturepractice.com or drop us an email, and we'll be happy to give you more information about CPAP. Um, okay, I've got a couple of questions over here. Dr. Walker, you still there?
I'm still here.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Uh, um, I've got a couple of questions over here. One is, can you charge for posture exercises? Yeah, it's exercise. You can in fact, most insurance companies would rather you did charge for exercises because they want you to be empowering people. They don't want you to be creating a dependency. They want you to be empowering them. Okay. And the follow-up question from that is, can you charge patients for this? And the answer is, of course. It's a matter of creating perceived value, and there's a couple of different models you can do that. Again, contact me offline. We talk about a lot of things in that direction. Um, do you need to use? You can use any. You don't have to use a posture zone grid. Posture zone grids are prejudiced. Disclaimer, but they're the best grids on the market. Posture Zone makes more kinds of grids than anybody else on the planet. They've got wall grids that are hard that you can exercise against, and the grid stuff doesn't come off. The thickness of the lines and the spacing are made to show up well in a picture, so you can really visualize subtle variations in posture. And there's versions for walls, for doors in a smaller office, portable for screenings, both standard and metric. Posture Zone has the largest selection of grids on the planet. That I'm aware of, and if you know anything else, let me know. But there really aren't a lot of other possibilities.
Dr. Weinberg, I have a question.
Shoot.
If someone wants to determine if they're not available to go to Washington or to Greece, how do they figure out where else you're doing live seminars? Which site would they go to do that?
Posture Practice. Any information about the Posture Practice model, go to Posture Practice, and
Okay.
it'll be under the thing about seminar schedule.
Gotcha.
But also, if a question, no, you don't. If you want to be a CPAP, if you want to get involved, there's information on CPAP at Posture Practice. But my suggestion is sign up for CPAP. You'll be getting login information to the online course, as well as wall grids and manuals in very much a step-by-step progression. And using the staff implementation of every staff meeting, you have a 10-minute video that you watch with the staff. And during that week, you've watched probably an hour of the training videos, so you know more than the staff. And that sets you up to teach the staff during that 10 minutes using using this week's handout. This is the exercise of the week. Next week, you add one more exercise. Next week, you add one more exercise. So it's very much a hand-holding, step-by-step. There's a tremendous amount of information, but it's arranged in a way to make it really flow in terms of incorporating it and pulling it into a practice. Good question.
I'd like to do a little bit of a commercial at this point, Dr. Weininger. This is Dr. Walker speaking. The reason I got interested in this, and the reason when we hooked up at the FCA, was I had get a lot of inquiries on a regular basis. Although we sell product at Chiro One Source, we get a lot of questions about all kinds of things. This week I had somebody had questions about something to do in their dark room. Just a whole host of questions. Well, we're getting a lot of questions about rehab and easy rehab to implement into an office and rehab that made sense. And that's why we hooked up in the first place. That's why I was interested in looking further into your stuff. And the few practices that I've been in, I don't go in a lot of practices, but the few that I've been in that are using this, this as a protocol, when I had a chance to interview, the practitioners, their retention and their follow-through was greatly enhanced because it was homework for the patient to do. And it was homework they could check the patient on. Because I know many of you send a patient home with something to do, and you ask them the next time when they come in if they're doing it, they all say yes. And 80% of them aren't doing what you tell them to do in between times, and it's a good way to spot check them and say, okay, show me your balance exercise. Show me your alignment exercise. And they're very specific, and they're either doing it or they're not doing it. And the other thing I've noticed from being at the seminars, because I've met a lot of the CPAPs, because I've probably hosted, 6 or 7 seminars, I suspect. And, in talking with the CPAPs, just the change in their practice is tremendous because it's something to keep the patient compliant. And it gives them something to do in between visits. And I think the biggest thing it does is it puts them, it makes them responsible for their own welfare and for their own improvement, rather than thinking you as a practitioner is going to do it all for them. So just want to throw that in there.
Dr. Walker, thank you very, very much. That really makes me feel great hearing that. Thank you very, very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
So, I'll see you here again on April 7th, and you've got to. I also think we're going to be here for a webinar in 2 weeks as well for the Obamacare manual with Dr. Cross.
Yeah, there is a compliance seminar that's occurring on March 3rd, same time, 1 o'clock, and then part 2 of this will be April 7th at 1 o'clock on a Tuesday.
And especially stay tuned to that one. If you are planning on, if you have your annual marketing calendar set up, great. My assumption is that May is Posture Month is part of that. If you don't have that set up, and especially if you want framework for building that, and that's one reason that tune in for the next webinar. And again, this is a great opportunity to start CPAP with a gift from C1S of tools and a gift from BodyZone of a free portable grid. That's in addition to everything else that's on the website for CPAP. So I hope to have you in the program. Part of CPAP testing is hands-on testing out as well. So I hope to meet all of you at a CPAP testing at some point in time, and have a great day.
Dr. Weininger, thanks for being with us, and thank all the attendees as well for being here today. Really appreciate it. And with that, I think we'll sign off.